Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today with a deck profile to share on my take of hyperlink plants. So this idea actually came back a little bit. You might have seen my Tengu plant synchro deck. I basically just wanted to revisit 2011 format and bring that favorite deck of mine over here to 2017 Link era and see how it would fare under the new Master Rule 4. And as I was playing that deck, I realized there is an insane amount of free tokens, tuners, and non-tuners that you're able to get with that deck. And it serves as a huge untapped resource that can be used for link summoning. And frankly, it felt just like the new synchro mechanic, or rather, the new link mechanic felt like when synchros first came out. Back then, it was a very freeing experience to have a ton of speed and consistency that you could bring out your key boss monsters again and again, and this link deck really felt like that. Plus, when Link Kuriboh came around and I finally got my copy of it, after it seems like everyone else, I just had to try this strategy out, and it's become one of my favorite decks to play right now because of just how fast and furious it is. So this is going to be a let's build as usual. I'm going to go through my reasonings for why certain cards are in here in the quantities that they are. But if you just want to see the alphabetical profile, you can go ahead and click the timestamp either in the description box down below or in the comments section. I always pin it to the top so you have easy access there. And then if after seeing that you have any questions, you could check out the middle portion of the video where again I go through my thought processes. So let's get started in building this thing. The first step of a deck is of course always to figure out what exactly is it that you want to be in the core of the deck that fits where the deck is going to go. And in this case, I already said it, was the plant deck. And single-handedly, the reason I wanted to play this deck was Dandelion. Anytime it hits the grave for any reason, you get 2 tokens. And although those are plants with 0 attack and defense, you do have some interesting traits for those tokens. They're level 1, which means we can use them with Link Kuriboh. Plant type has overall good synergy. And the fact that it's a wind monster actually means we can go for weird things like Akashic Magician or Ebe, because that wind attribute isn't used quite as frequently as other cards. On top of that, we have real classics like Debris Dragon and Crane, both of which can go and normal summon themselves to go and revive your Dandelion. So you can see how now one monster in and of itself brings out 2 tokens, so it becomes 3 total cards. And if somehow you're able to bring out one of these guys, you bring back that Dandelion, so you normal summon a monster, have your Dandelion, and have 2 more tokens, so you have a total of 7 cards just for no reason that you can go and link summon with. So that is the whole premise of this entire deck. Abuse and reuse Dandelion for our link summons. And of course, we can always tutor the Dandelion and the other parts of the plant engine with our Lone Fire Blossom, which will be integral for gluing together some pieces of this deck later on as well. And it's also interesting to note that Lone Fire Blossom is another target we can use with either Crane or Debris Dragon. So if you wanted to go more of a synchro route or introduce some of those cards, you honestly could. I also really like the pair of Mathematician. Obvious play would be, you go and yard your Dandelion and you're able to go and spawn the 2 tokens, so you have 3 monsters off of a normal summon. But I really like playing the Rose Lover in here, because essentially what happens now is we can go ahead and use the Mathematician to dump Rose Lover, and her ability is while she's in the graveyard, you can banish it to special summon any one plant from your hand, and if you do, that monster is unaffected by your opponent's trap effects for the entire turn, and you can only use one of that, or rather, you can only use Rose Lover's effect once per turn. So if we break that down, that means we can Mathman into Rose Lover, banish it to summon either Lone Fire to go into Dandy, or directly into Dandy if we drew it, and that monster can't be snared by your opponent's Solemn Strikes or whatever, which is really cool in the case of Lone Fire Blossom, because now you can just go for whatever key piece you need to. Then from there, you have 2 Earth monsters through Dandelion and Mathematician, allowing you to summon Melee of the Trees, who takes 2 Earth monsters to summon. She's a rank 3 with 1700 attack, and once per turn you can detach a material to do one of 2 things. If you have no plants in your grave, which I guess if you Mathman for Rose Lover and banish her, you may not unless you end up having the Lone Fire Blossom to tutor into Dandy, you're able to go ahead and Foolish Burial a plant straight from your deck to the graveyard. So that's really cool, because that means we can go ahead and, just fetch our classic plant tuner monsters, and these guys just serve as free extra bodies. If you normal them, it's 2 monsters. Even if you mill them with effects like this, it's an extra monster for no reason. And that's awesome. Or if we can again set up another plant, so let's say you go Rose Lover into Lone Fire, tribute the Lone Fire and go Dandelion, with Mathematician into Melee, you're able to go and use Melee's effect, detach Dandelion to get 2 free tokens, and revive the Dandelion because you target Dandelion after activating that ability. Since you already have a plant in the grave in Lone Fire Blossom, you're able to go and activate that effect. Upon sending your Dandelion to the grave, you can target it again, and your Dandelion will trigger, so you just get 2 more tokens on top of bringing back Dandelion to make even more crazy shenanigans. So this deck just takes everything I loved about Dandelion, Crane, Melee, and Debris Dragon and just wraps it all together because we finally have a mechanic that allows us to abuse the heck out of all of these free tokens and other monsters. So that's really where the fun of this deck comes. And on top of that, of course, we're playing the Foolish Burial because you saw how great it is to yard any random plant. Doing it without a normal summon is even better because you can go and normal one of these guys. 1-for-1 lets you go and fetch either Rose Lover if you have something like a Lone Fire in your hand, or you can go and tutor out these as always. And then Soul Charge is just insane in this deck because on top of all the crazy plant combos we can do, you can go and summon back your Link monsters with Soul Charge to just bridge over, extra Link, whatever. And in the first turn, if you're going first especially, it just won't even matter that you can't attack because you'll just form an impossible board. It's definitely worth playing the Soul Charge. And if you looked at that previous section and thought, that's a lot of normal summons you need, you're probably going to have to normal the Lone Fire, the Mathematician, the Debris Dragon, the Crane. Yeah, that's a ton of normal summons, and that honestly was one of my biggest problems I had when I was first creating this deck idea. But don't forget, plants also have the wonderful support of the Predaplant engine all through that same Lone Fire Blossom, and we have a lot of free monsters to discard for the Scorpio's ability to go ahead and set up our Glow Up Bulb or Dandelion or whatever off of just that discard cost. So this was just a natural fit. Essentially, if you've never seen this combo before, I'll go through it very quickly. You discard a monster with Ophrys Scorpio to summon out Darlingtonia from your deck, and that triggers off of the special summon of Scorpio, or through Scorpio, that you get to add a fusion card directly from your deck to your hand. So you add Brilliant Fusion for later, and then you go and Xyz with the 2 of these into your MX Saber Invoker, who's a generic rank 3 that lets you detach a material and go ahead and summon an Earth level 4 warrior from your deck, or Beast Warrior. But we're going to go for Heroic Challenger Thousand Blades, who basically comes back once per turn from the graveyard if you take damage. So now you have 2 Earth monsters, so normally you go Mrs. Radiant, but the truth of this deck is just like any other deck that extra links, you want the cardinal compass point directions up, down, left, and right instead of diagonal arrows, because diagonal arrows can't co-link, they can't point to each other, and so you won't be able to claim the abilities of your best monsters. So what do we do instead? Well, we have 2 warrior monsters. So by using the 2 of these guys, I can go ahead and summon a Akashic Magician into my extra monster zone, who has arrows up and down, and as we continue to summon monsters, we can easily get a link 3 or 4 here to claim Akashic Magician's abilities. So when she's summoned, normally she gets to bounce everything that she points to. So that can clear your opponent's card, recycle degenerate cards like Grinder Golem, whatever. In this deck though, I just want it as the downward arrow, and I can use that second ability where I excavate cards, mill them if they're not the card I called, and then add any copies of things like Soul Charge directly to my hand to make just stupid boards off of this card. Essentially, this is our Link 2 of choice for this particular combo. Now we're ready to go ahead and activate Brilliant Fusion, which lets us go and fusion summon Gem Knight, Seraph Knight directly to the board from using materials in our graveyard. And when we use Trick Clown as our light, we get to go and take the 1000 damage or lose it or whatever, and then we summon this, allowing us to go ahead and summon back this guy. And now from here, we have, for just 1 normal summon of Ophrys Scorpio, these 4 monsters on the field that we can do stuff with, and we have an additional normal summon, so now we can go and summon that Lone Fire, or we can go ahead and tweak our deck a little bit. We could play Crane off of these guys, or, we could have discarded a monster that's useful that could come back, like Glow Up Bulb, Spore, or Rose Lover could have an effect as well. So this is like the key piece that ties both themes here together. As always with this combo, I want to do a brief comment section here where I go and explain the quantities that I play for this engine. So for the extra deck cards, I only play 1 of everything, because realistically, once you go off with that Seraph Knight, you probably have enough free resources to win, so you're never even trying to resolve it more than once. I know you could try and fit in a second one and do some other crazy things. It's just not worth it for space purposes in this deck. Akashic, you only really need 1 because there are some other Link 2s and 3s we can go for. Instead, if for whatever reason it gets stopped, and then Invoker, of course, we only need 1 because once you summon off your Earth Warrior, you don't necessarily have the best targets that would be worth bringing out on top of what you're already doing in the Thousand Blades. For the main deck monsters and cards, we do want the 3-0 for Scorpio, which means with 3 Lone Fires, we now have 6 ways of getting this to the board to get our combo started, and yard cards like Dandelion and other targets that we want to activate or retrieve from the graveyard. So that card is a given. And on top of that, 3 Brilliant Fusion. I actually considered playing just one of these because I figured, well, if you're able to go and search it through this, you don't necessarily need more than 3. But with all of the stuff that's going on with extra normal summoning in this deck, I really do think the Brilliant Fusion is still good to draw, even if you don't draw one of your Ophrys Scorpios or Lone Fires, and that just gives you now 9 cards that you could start a lot of your plays with, so it's still worth playing the 3. Now from here, we obviously play Gem Knight Garnet, and normally, if it were just this engine, I always play the 1, but when I play the Predaplants, I always play 2 of the Garnets, and the reason is, because Garnet isn't the only card that we could draw that would screw up everything in our deck. When you think about it, all told, this engine ends up becoming more than 10 cards, and you really don't want to make a quarter of your deck be dead because you drew your 1 Garnet. So Garnet has to be in here to make sure the Predaplants are all live and your Brilliant Fusions are all live, so he has to be at 2. The Heroic Challenger, Thousand Blades, and Trick Clown are also normally at 1 in the deck, and I only play one of each of these because if you go and use this or this, it's a once per turn effect. You summon this 1 time off of MX Saber, don't really need a second one, and then once you yard this thing, it comes back, but it's only once per turn, and you're using it as a link material, so it won't even come back anyway. So there's a problem now where we save ourselves from drawing the 1 Garnet and breaking the entire engine, but now we have these 2 guys, and if we draw either of them, the combo dies too. So the way I fix it is I go and play a Goblinberg as an additional Earth Warrior monster. So Goblinberg's great because you can go ahead and just bring out extra dead monsters. So you can bring out Garnet, and then that'll let you go, you don't clear it from your hand, you can go and make more link plays, or you can go for something like Baguska, who doesn't affect any of your link monsters because you can't shift link monsters to defense position, while you basically slow down your opponent, build up your own cards, and then you fight back. So there are things you can do with the Goblinberg like that. It basically just serves as an extra target in the rare instance you've drawn Thousand Blades. And just by playing the 2 of these, I never have had a situation really where I can't use Invoker because the chance of drawing both of these is just so low. On top of that, on the light front, we actually don't have a lot of good light monsters that work with the rest of the deck here. So I do play the Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, who in and of herself can go destroy one of your opponent's cards, yard herself. She has 0 attack, so you can bring it back with Debris Dragon, and she's a level 3, so you can bring her back with Crane. So there's just some synergy over there as well. And we'll get to one other light monster in the deck as well that I ended up adding last minute that really makes this deck just over the top. And then now we have 2, 2, and 2, so we can safely play just 1 copy of Darlingtonia Cobra. And the reason I only play 1 Cobra versus all these is this and this have to be at more than 1, because if I play just 1 of each, it's essentially like I'm playing 2 cards that I don't want to draw 1 of. That's essentially a semi-limited card. You're going to open with that roughly 24 to 28% of the time, depending on whether you're going first or second. And that's actually like a quarter of your duels. You do not want to lose a quarter of your duels because you made a quarter of your deck dead from Garnet or from the light monster. So I had to play 2 of those. This guy, you're able to use with the MX Saber Invoker, and because there are other uses for these guys, they're still worth playing. But Cobra, if you draw Cobra, the only thing that's dead is these 3 monsters here, the Ophrys Scorpio. Brilliant Fusion is entirely live. Even the Lone Fires are live in this deck because we're playing other plant monsters. And so this became the most expendable card that I don't mind drawing. Sure, I still don't like doing it, but it's a lot better because instead of having, 10 plus cards in my deck be dead, I only have the 4 Predaplant cards, which means I can still Brilliant Fusion and do all my other plays as well. So yeah, you end up adding a few more cards you don't necessarily want to draw into your deck. But with clever play, with, Ghost Ogre being versatile, Goblinberg helping you out with your plays and stuff, you can kind of get around the terrible draws. The only really terrible cards you never want to draw would be the Garnets and the Darlingtonia, and that's basically my kind of solution for making this engine as consistent as possible, because it's just too powerful not to run. The other light monster that I'm playing in this deck, of all things, is Fluffle Wings. And this is a card that my brother loves playing because he actually runs Fluffles and Fright Furs. And I've always hated this card because it just gives you 2 free cards into your hand for draws, and then it searches another Fluffle card. And it's silly what it's able to do. In this deck, it actually does a lot of things to fix your deck's problems when you run it with 3 Fluffle Bear and 1 Toy Vendor. So essentially the way this engine works is Fluffle Bear has 2 abilities. You could tribute him from the field to add polymerization from your graveyard to your hand, which obviously in this deck is 100% pointless. But you can actually discard him straight from your hand to set Toy Vendor directly from your deck to the field. Cool thing is, that dodges things like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring because you're setting from the deck to the field, not drawing it or milling it to the graveyard, which is really cool. But the best part of that is now Bear ends up becoming an Earth level 3, so I can crane it back, and then I can go melee and make all my plays off of just doing that. So that's really the big reason I wanted to play this. I needed a level 3 that yards itself for free, and this card does that and more. So from there, once we've yarded this and we add Toy Vendor, we can activate it, and once per turn it lets us discard any card from our hand, think Dandelion or any of the other plants that are useful, or just other dead cards we really have no purpose for. You can go and draw and reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a Fluffle monster, you can go and special summon any one monster from your hand, which of course is insane, but the chance of you drawing one of your 2 bears or your wings is not the highest off of just 1 card. So more often than not, it ends up going to the graveyard, but then again, hey, that's not bad either, because now I just turned this into kind of an upstart goblin that lets me yard Dandelion, Glow Up Bulb, etc. So it helps fix your bad hands, helps yard something in the graveyard to make your Crane actually viable at 3 copies, and if that weren't enough, we have the light monster here that's an additional target for your Brilliant Fusion. So Fluffle Wings is this really dumb card. It says when it's in your graveyard, you can go ahead and banish it to target one other Fluffle monster in your graveyard. So I would go banish this, target your bear, and then Wings' effect will activate in this way. So you draw 1 card by banishing the Fluffle you targeted. So you draw 1. Then you could send Toy Vendor to your graveyard to draw 1 more card. So you literally just got a Pot of Greed from your graveyard off of a card that just milled 1 card for you and loaded a card from your hand to the grave for free. And as if that weren't enough, when Toy Vendor is sent to the graveyard for any reason from anywhere, you get to go and add a Fluffle monster from your deck to your hand. So that means you get to go and add Fluffle Bear to your hand. So you drew 2 cards and then added a free card. And although this may not be the best thing to add to your hand, a free monster is always good in a Link spam deck, because when you have Firewall Dragon out and he can keep summoning out free ammo from your hand, that bear just becomes another material. So this engine, as quirky as it looks, is really quite nice, because all you really care about drawing are the bears so that you can get Toy Vendor. The vendor itself is actually not that bad to draw on its own, because you could still yard extra copies of these if you draw them. And because the engine pulls itself out of your deck for the most part, very rarely do you actually draw a piece of it and then it's just sitting there not doing anything. So it contributes a lot of its traits as basically useful little tools to the rest of the deck. And so far, this was like the best thing that I could have thrown in here. I was originally playing 2 Artifact Scythe and 3 Sanctums like I was in ABCs, and I really like the idea of you have Firewall Dragon or Trigate Wizard that can deal with some of your opponent's threats, so restrict your opponent with the Artifact Scythe. But those cards guarantee you'll be sitting on them for the first turn and not be able to play them, whereas these make your hands much more live, much more quickly. And so just the speed you were able to get from this makes it much more viable. And so to finish out the rest of the main and extra deck, we're going to play 2 copies of Instant Fusion. Reason for this is this lets us go and of course summon Thousand Eyes Restrict, which lets us steal an opponent's monster and then turn it into Link Kuriboh, because Link Kuriboh just needs a level 1, and Thousand Eyes Restrict fulfills that requirement. So if you're going second, it's a nice little problem solver here. This is another fusion spell that you can search off of that Predaplant engine as well. So you're able to go and, if you happen to open with Brilliant Fusion, search a copy of Instant Fusion, and then just make a more just ridiculous field because you got this free combo piece that gets you a Link 1 monster who has the ability to come back. So Link Kuriboh is fairly new, so if you've never seen this card before, it's got 300 attack, just like all the Kuribohs, a Link marker that points down. And to be completely honest, when I first saw this card, I was like, why would you need a Link 1 that points down? Well, first of all, it's when you have this and you can summon something else here. If you use Link Kuriboh as material, you now freed up this zone, so now you have multiple zones that you can summon into. On top of that, Link Kuriboh has an ability that says you can go ahead and summon it back to the field during either player's turn by tributing a level 1 you have on your board. And it can be any level 1. Could be a monster like this. It could be something like a fluff token that you're going to get an obscene amount of just for free in this deck. And now you have another level 1 effect Cyberse dark monster that you can use for link summoning, and that basically lets you control what you're summoning because you can't always use tokens for link monsters. There's some restrictions on cards. This card is almost never going to be blocked by those restrictions, so this lets you go for some silly things like Ningirsu, as we'll get to later. On top of all of that, it's generally useful if you have it on your board because you could tribute it when your opponent's monster declares an attack to make that guy's attack 0. And then if you haven't revived it that turn, you could sack another level 1 monster and bring it back again. And it just gives you more protection for your board so that your opponent has a tougher time getting rid of it. So it's just a free monster that keeps coming back. It's just really, really cool what it's able to do for this deck. And then the last 2 cards in the main deck are Maxx C and Ash Blossom. So essentially, Maxx C is pretty much a win button. You're going to play this thing because of its ability, and since it's 500 attack monster, you can actually bring it back with Debris Dragon as well, so there's extra benefit there. It pretty much just helps out in every way that you could want. And then the Ash Blossom is cool because just like the Ghost Ogre, it's got 0 attack and it's a level 3, so it's a viable target for both Crane and Debris Dragon, and that makes all of your plays live. Let's say you go second, your opponent goes first. You have some hand traps to help you out, and once they're yarded, on top of slowing down your opponent or outright stopping some of their big plays, you get to go and immediately kickstart off with one of your revival cards and just go off because of that. So these hand traps really do synergize for that reason. I played one of each just because I didn't really want to log this deck down with too many hand traps if, you know, I'm not playing in widely competitive events, so I don't have to worry about all those types of crazy decks all the time, and it really does hurt the consistency of your deck to play too many of these things. I mean, with one of each, you have a ton of variety. You're never and absolutely never stopped by that once per turn clause. Usually that doesn't even matter if you're playing like a pair, but this way, like, there's never an issue. You just get the maximum benefit out of every single card. And then for our other Link monsters that finish up our extra deck, we're playing 2 Proxy Dragon. I was originally considering playing 3 of this thing because of how awesome it is, but you do have some recycling power with Firewall Dragon, and if you play this card properly, you won't necessarily need more than 2. Usually the first one is a stepping stone that lets you go for a Link 3 or 4, and then the second one is what you actually put on the board for its protection effect or to co-link with like a Trigate Wizard or a Firewall Dragon. So that's why you need 2. And on top of that, we play Eve, because whereas Proxy Dragon is just generic and we can afford to play 2, Eve is actually pretty cool because you need 2 monsters with different types and attributes, but that happens easily because if you Debris Dragon a Dandelion, that's an Earth Plant and a Wind Dragon. That's an Eve for 1 card, and then you get 2 tokens that you could turn into a Proxy Dragon or Link Kuriboh or whatever. Go into that Link Kuriboh, and that lets you go and turn your Proxy Dragon into something like the Ningirsu, which of course says when this thing is summoned, if it's pointing to any World Chalice monsters, you draw a card for each one. So now you actually get a combo going. Obviously not in the exact context that I mentioned here, but that's the framework for a combo that lets you go draw a card. Ningirsu basically gets rid of cards without even targeting because you can send things to the graveyard at effect resolution. So dump your Brilliant Fusion, get rid of your opponent's card, you know, attack with this big monster, and then you don't really care about either of their last effects because you're not playing any World Chalice main deck monsters, but Eve has some really good protection effects as well, on top of just being an easy card to summon. So while she's linked, so pointing to anything or being pointed by anything, she cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and your opponent cannot target it with any card effects, so that makes it hard to take her down. And then if your opponent would try to destroy one of the cards she points to, you can send her to the graveyard instead. And since she doesn't die, that means if your opponent activates Dark Hole or Raigeki or a card that would destroy normally your whole board, Ebe can go to the graveyard instead of the 2 monsters that she's pointing to because she wouldn't normally die. Therefore, you can fulfill that instead condition on the destruction switch. So that's really cool. You already have Proxy Dragon to help you do that, but the big difference between Proxy and Ebe is Proxy sends the monster it's sending to the that's pointing to the graveyard, so you're not protecting your big boss monsters. You want a fluff token or something else that is basically a free monster for Proxy to point to, whereas Ebe directly supplements everything that she's working with. And so there are different kind of takes or flavors on these that really make both of them worth playing in your deck. Honestly, I feel like Ebe's protection is a lot better for getting individual monsters. Proxy Dragon's better if you can get like just like an extra monster, but usually it's in here just because it's easier to summon more than anything else. We also play for Link 3's Tri-Gate Wizard and this Gaia Saber. So Gaia Saber is literally in here for 2 reasons. One, it is a generic Link monster, so you can summon it off of tokens and whatever, and that actually does come up quite often. The second thing is his arrows point not towards your opponent, so you can go an extra Link with this card and then actually seal that off. And since it's got 2600 attack, blocking your opponent's extra zone is really annoying because 26 is kind of difficult to get over when they don't have access to that extra deck. So that's really why it's in here. Not your best card, but not the worst. I've gotten summoned this thing a few times. It's actually helped me out quite a lot in those games, and I definitely would not cut it for its versatility as of quite yet. The Tri-Gate Wizard, of course, has 3 different abilities that you have based on what's co-linked to it. So you actually have to have monsters pointing to him at the arrows that he's pointing outward. And he's really, really good. So summoning conditions are any 2 monsters except tokens. But again, you get so many tokens that you could turn into Link Kuriboh, bring Link Kuriboh back, link up with any of these, or just bring back like a Dandelion with Debris and then have another monster ready for this. Like, it's really easy to bring this card out because you can just link up into him since he only needs 2 or more monsters. And then abilities running through them. 1 or more co-linked monster. Anything that this guy is co-linked to does double battle damage through an opponent's monster. So this 2500 attack Ningirsu, for instance, would attack the opponent's monster. If it ends up doing like 1000 damage, it would do 2000 damage, which is pretty good because it points to everything. And when you have Firewall Dragon, Ningirsu, even Gaia Saber or Orolo Dragon as your big beaters, it does quite a lot of damage when you're able to do that. Especially Borreload, because you decrease your opponent's attack by 5, which basically does an extra 1000 damage. The 2 or more lets you go and banish a card on the field. So between the 2 of these guys, you have a lot of free removal while you're linking up to something like Firewall Dragon for more removal, or you just sit on these guys, especially for Tri-Gate's 3rd effect, where if you have 3 or more, 3 guys co-linked to it, once per turn, you basically Cyber Dragon Infinity one of your opponent's cards, but the card is banished instead of destroyed. So that really makes your opponent not want to throw random cards into this a lot of times, because it's not like, oh, I'll just burn a Burning Abyss and then get rid of this guy, because you're losing that monster, you're not claiming its abilities in the graveyard, and you don't have the ability to access it later. This really makes it a lot harder to take this guy down, especially again when you have Ebe pointing to it and a Proxy Dragon pointing to it, and you have like, you know, a Link Kuriboh on the board so they can't take it out in battle. Like, it's just crazy what this card's able to do, and you are able to extra link so easily for this, or not necessarily extra link, you could do that every once in a while. You can co-link this with 3 so easily that it's definitely one of your best boss monsters. And then finally, the last 2 are the Link 4s here. So Firewall Dragon I'll get to in just a second because he's just so good. Orolo Dragon, big and simple, 3000 attack, can't be targeted by monster effects, which makes him really annoying. You steal your opponent's Borreload because anytime he battles, you can steal that monster into a zone it's pointing to. It has left and right arrows, meaning that it can actually serve as kind of the middle bridge monster if Ebe is not there for some reason. And on top of that, again, you do the 500 attack reduction ability, which makes it easier to do more damage, and your opponent can't respond to it. And I'm still looking for some really cheeky way to make it so your opponent can't respond to that effect and then basically spell speed for the opponent with something, but I haven't yet found something to do that with. But if you have an idea on that, let me know down below. We could come up with some stupid thing with that together. But overall, it's basically this deck's version of Goyo Guardian. A lot of times when I'm playing this deck, I find unless I go Ningirsu, which you need the Link Kuriboh for because, you need the multiple Link monsters to summon this guy. Orolo Dragon pretty much is your best answer to your opponent's Orolo Dragon. So that's really why he's here, and he's just huge. And then the one Firewall Dragon. So part of the reason why I'm playing one Firewall is because I honestly feel like this card is going to get limited just like it did in OCG. So part of it was just me saying, well, I already have one. I'm just going to keep the one, and then that's what I'll use. But the second thing is you actually have not necessarily always a use for two. Like, granted, there are times I sometimes want two of this, and I sometimes want two Link Kuriboh, but that's mostly not the case. You can get away with using one of these because you go and link up into this, and then you can co-link just like the Trigate Wizard with 3 guys, bounce your opponent's threats during their turn, and then recycle, let's say, itself along with like a Debris Dragon or a Crane to reuse your Dandelion next turn, and then make an explosive play doing that. This is really in here because it is just an amazing disruption card. It's basically Constellar Pleiades on crack, and then on top of that, you do have the ability where if you send something that is pointing to the graveyard for a Link summon as an example, or for Lone Fire's effect, or to bring back Link Kuriboh, there's so many reasons that would happen. You get to throw your free monsters from your hand back onto the field, and if you summon in one of these zones, you can go and use that for material and summon another monster, and use that for material and summon another monster. This thing is just insane even at 1 copy. So the way I saw it was, yes, having 2 is a great luxury, but overall for balance sake and to be able to fit everything in for variety, I just felt 1 is enough. You probably don't need 2. You could play 2, honestly, but I haven't found something. There's not necessarily a huge loop quite with this deck where you'd want to play like 2 or 3 of these things. You can get away with just 1, and it's just still amazing. And finally, to wrap up this video, I want to share some of the basic combos that this deck is able to do. Now, granted, this thing has so many combos in it that I can't possibly go over everything, and that is why this deck is so fun. You saw all the free extenders and summons that I put into this deck. All those in some order will appear, and then they let you go and extend the play. So you really learn how to play this deck as you go, and that's part of what makes it so exhilarating to actually experience. Let's say we did this basic setup off of just Ophrys Scorpio from earlier in the video, right? So you have these on the board, and let's say you either drew your Dandelion or one of your Lone Fires to search it out, which, is still fairly common. If you drew the Ophrys straight up, you have 4 shots in your deck to get this, so it happens quite a lot. You already used 1 normal summon on Ophrys, but we can use a second one on that Lone Fire Blossom, which will let us go. You can cycle through the Lone Fires. I usually do that so that Akashic Magician can actually mill the other plants I want, but whatever. You summon your Dandelion, and that's great. So from here, you have use your 2 Earth monsters to go for Proxy Dragon. And the reason is, Proxy Dragon's generic here, so you can really summon it with anything, but by leaving the Light Spellcaster and the Earth Plant, I can go ahead and summon Ebe with those differing materials here. And that triggers Dandelion's ability, allowing me to fetch 2 of my fluff tokens. I always use these little lamb tokens because, they're fluffy, and I don't have foil, or I don't even know if foil fluff tokens exist at this point, but whatever. So you got this board. From here, depending on whether you're going first or second, you could do a lot of things. Let's say I'm going second. So I can go and turn this token into a Link Kuriboh. And then Link Kuriboh and Proxy Dragon are 2 Link monsters that add up 1 + 2 is 3, allowing me to go and summon Ningirsu. So Ningirsu's cool because now with Ebe, I draw 1 card. I can go, and if I'm going second again, get rid of Brilliant Fusion to send something my opponent has to the grave. And then on top of all that, I can turn the 2 of these guys into the mighty Firewall Dragon, who will let me go and bounce more of my opponent's cards, or serve as protection because now Ebe protects the Firewall protects the board, and if I have anything else anywhere around here, or let's say I use the 2 of these for something, it'll trigger Firewall and I get more summons, so I can cheat past the 2 normal summons thanks to Brilliant Fusion and get additional summons off of this guy. And that's really crazy. This honestly could be used going first or second because of how flexible it is. But let's backtrack just a little bit here. Let's say we got to the point where I have the Proxy Dragon and the 2 tokens here. And this deck was built again with so many extenders. So let's say I either discarded Glow Bulb or Spore off the Ophrys Scorpio, or I drew an Instant Fusion, which I have 2 copies of, or honestly, if I drew a Brilliant Fusion already, or an instant fusion, the Ophrys can go and, or the Darlingtonia rather, can go ahead and search the other copy. So that's like, what, 2 more copies of Brilliant Fusion, I guess, that technically fit in as subs that allow me to get an extra monster. You get the point. There are a lot of free extenders in this deck. And with 1 additional monster, you can do so much more. So let's say I'm going first in this case. I mean, honestly, you could do the same combo going second as well, but going first, it has the most impact. I can go ahead and turn the token into Link Kuriboh. And now that I have a non-token monster and a Link 2 monster, I can add up to Link 3, which will let me go Tri-Gate Wizard. So we're trying to co-link this guy here so that we're able to, go ahead and lock our opponent out of a lot of really powerful cards. Instant Fusion as an example, let me go Thousand Eyes Restrict. So let's say I go ahead and now turn the 2 of these into Proxy Dragon. And again, that Thousand Eyes could have been anything else. It could have been like a Glow Up Bulb or Spore already in the grave. You pick and choose whatever you have. Now we have triple co-linked Tri-Gate Wizard turn 1 with these 2 guys protecting it, and Akashic Magician can mill 3. And I always call Soul Charge if I'm going first, because if you happen to luck into Soul Charge with those 3, now you can go and bring back these Link monsters. Or honestly, what I'd probably do is bring back Dandelion and the Proxy Dragon, which will let you go for a Link 3 right there. Spawn 2 more tokens, and you could do crazy shenanigans and do whatever. Actually, you'd start running out of field, so you'd have to maybe use Akashic or whatever. There are lots of crazy things you can do when you hit Soul Charge in this deck. You just keep building out. You probably extra link. It's just crazy what you're able to do. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing this deck profile as much as I did putting the theme together. We'll start off with the main deck here. So we have a lone copy of Haru Urara, our Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, triple Crane, Dandelion, triple Debris Dragon, triple Fluffle Bear, and then 1 Fluffle Wings. Then we have Lone Ghost Ogre, Glow Up Bulb, Goblinberg, Heroic Challenger, Thousand Blades, triple Lone Fire Blossom, double Math Man, 1 Max C, Performage Trick Clown, and Darlingtonia Cobra, triple Predaplant Ophrys Scorpio, a Rose Lover, a Spore, and double Gem Knight Garnet for our monsters. And then for spells, we have triple Brilliant Fusion, Foolish Burial, double Instant Fusion, 1-for-1 Soul Charge, and a lone Toy Vendor for a 40-card main deck. And then our extra deck consists of 1 Link 1 in Link Kuriboh. Then we have Akashic Magician, Eve, World Chalice Priestess, and double Proxy Dragon for our Link 2s. We have Gaia Saber the Lightning Shadow, Ningirsu, World Chalice Warrior, and Tri-Gate Wizard for our Link 3s, and then Orolo Dragon and Firewall Dragon are our Link 4s. Our XCs, we have Melier of the Trees and MX Saber Invoker at rank 3, Baguska, number 41, at rank 4, and then fusions, we have Thousand Eyes Restrict for that instant fusion, and then Gem Knight, Seraph Knight for the brilliant fusion. That's the end of this video, but if you enjoyed it, I encourage you guys to leave a like and share it so we could spread the video to as many other people who may enjoy the content as well. If you like this series, you can see more of it by clicking the video annotation on the right, or you can click the one on the left to see the last video I did. And if you really enjoyed what you saw today, then I invite you guys to subscribe to JDGaming to see more Yu-Gi-Oh! Updates. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.